got those questions, and I'll ask you those and chime in. Hi, everyone. As you're joining here, welcome. We're so thrilled to have you here this evening. We're going to give everyone a couple minutes to join, get settled. If you're just joining us and you're an early bird, feel free to pop in the chat. Let us know where you are, how old your kids are, so we can learn a little bit about you. The chat and Q&A should be up and going. Maybe some of you are in the middle of bedtime right now.
Washington, D.C. Fantastic.
Love it. I lived there for 8 years. I love it there.
Oh, amazing.
So good. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us at what is 7 p.m. Eastern, peak bedtime. We've got someone from Reno. Okay. Room sharing. So Natalie, we're going to have lots to talk about.
For sure.
All right. Just about another minute and we'll get started. Again, if you're just joining, feel free to pop in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from and how old your kids are. Anything that's top of mind. All right, what do you think, Natalie? Should we get started?
I think we should get started, Chloe.
Let's get started, just to honor everyone's time.
Great.
Okay, let me just move the chat window out of the way so I can see you, Natalie. Okay. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to our sleep workshop powered by Cooper and Nanit. We're going to be talking sleep best practices today, and I'm so excited to be here with Natalie. My name is Dr. Chloe Massey. I'm here from Cooper, and I work on the education team there. So everything from research to writing curriculum to leading groups. My background is in early childhood education turned researcher, and probably my most important job is that I am a mom to two. I have an almost 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. And I will tell you that we never stop talking about sleep, because if it's not baby sleep, it's toddler sleep and big kid sleep. So I'm very happy to be here today. And I am joining from Connecticut. Natalie, you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Chloe. My name is Dr. Natalie Barnett, and I am the VP of Clinical Research at Nanit. And I hope that most of you know what Nanit is, but at Nanit, we make a camera that uses computer vision, machine learning, and AI to monitor infant sleep, breathing, height, and developmental milestones. I lead our clinical research team at Nanit. So the amazing thing for me about Nanit, actually, when we were developing the algorithms many years ago, we did it in collaboration with some very famous pediatric sleep researchers, because we wanted the algorithms to be able to be so good that it could actually be used as a research tool as well as a consumer product. So whilst we are now, the best-selling smart baby monitor in the US, we're also used as a research tool in NIH-funded studies and NSF-funded studies, and the list of studies that we're used in is sort of growing every week. And so the amazing thing for parents is that they're effectively getting sort of a research grade sleep analytics every day, which we're incredibly proud of. So, and the camera is sort of just, one of our, many products now. It's our, main product, of course. But And so in my role, I work with universities and institutions all over the world who are either using our camera or using our data in their research. So we have this very engaged user base who are very willing to participate in research. So if you're a Nanit user, you may have received an email from me asking you to consent to participate in a research study. And so we have a lot of our user base are consenting to participate in research, and so we're able to conduct these sort of very large longitudinal studies, at a scale that has never been done before. So for example, sorry, I'm getting a little off topic, but it gets me a little bit excited, Chloe.
Yeah, I love it.
When we work with, a lot of the researchers that we work with, they're used to, doing a study over the course of 2 years, and they're recruiting, 30 or 40 patients, collecting sleep data for a couple of weeks on those 30 or 40 patients, and collecting survey data from the parents. We can now collect survey data and objective sleep data on thousands of babies in a day. So it has just meant that we can accelerate the pace of sort of pediatric sleep and development research, which is just an incredibly exciting place for us to be. So sorry.
It's so amazing. No, I could listen to you talk about it all day. It's so fascinating. Well, thank you, Natalie. This is a real treat to be talking with you and in partnership with Nanit for this. For those of you that don't know, just wanted to quickly tell you about Cooper. We are a virtual parenting community. So, it feels like many of us are parenting in isolation, which is never how it was supposed to be. You've likely heard the phrase, it takes a village, and so many of us are trying to find our village. And so we follow your parenting journey. We have small expert-led guided groups led by experts in child development, somebody like myself leading a group based on your child's age and development. And the whole idea is that we grow with you and your child. So trying to be that village that we all need. And we talk about the ways that your children are developing and the daily struggles. And while we have a highly curated curriculum to hit all those pain points, we're always answering the top of mind questions at the start of every group. And we are membership based. So there's a lot more that we offer, like office hours twice a week where you can hop online and connect with an expert and ask as many questions as you'd like. Someone recently referred to it as a parenting hotline, which I thought was so hysterical and kind of accurate. And we do lots of live assemblies with fabulous partners. So we're excited to be talking sleep. As a reminder, the Q&A is open. So please put your questions there and Natalie and I will get to them. But I think just to start off, I think that this is likely pretty obvious for all of us, because if you're here, you know how important sleep is, right? But we do know that sleep is essential to our children's development, right? It's not just an indulgence, although it's really lovely when we do get sleep, but it's biologically necessary for not just our kids, for us too, right? Our parenting changes when we are tired. I am sure I'm not the only parent who has felt that. And we have some really compelling research that tells us that adequate sleep is associated with all sorts of good things, like improved attention and behavior and learning and memory and your ability to emotionally regulate. Like, I'm sure you can remember a time when you're overtired and you lose it, right? Also associated with quality of life and mental and physical health. So I don't know that it takes much convincing, but sleep is just essential, and making sure that your children sleep enough is a really huge part of your role and responsibility as a parent. So
I love that, Chloe. And one thing that I really love parents to think about is that I really want them to understand that sleep is as important to their babies and children as nutrition or exercise. So we spend all of this time, making sure our babies are getting, the right organic, strawberries or oatmeal or whatever they're getting. But I want to make sure that parents are understanding that sleep is just that third pillar of health that we really want, everyone to be focusing on, and sort of, and really understanding how important it is to the whole family. And to your point, whilst it's absolutely, incredibly important to your child's growth and development and mood and learning and all the things, it's also incredibly important to how you're functioning as parents. And, I'm pretty sure everyone on this call is a parent, and things just feel so much better when everyone is getting the sleep that they need. You can't be the parent you want to be, or the partner you want to be, or the employee you want to be, if you're not getting all of the sleep that you need. So I don't want parents to feel guilty about prioritizing sleep for themselves or for their kids, because it's just going to help the whole family function better. Everyone is going to be better off when the whole family is sleeping. And that kind of starts by, getting these babies and kids to be sleeping better. Then mom and dad parents have the opportunity to be getting the sleep that they need, and to be then enjoying this journey of parenting, because it's not that enjoyable when you're completely sleep deprived, but it can be, it really can be amazing, and really a lot of fun. But you need to be well rested for those things to be fun.
Totally. And what I would say to go off of that, if you're sitting in on this call and your sleep and or your child's sleep is really not where you want it to be right now, it is not ever too late to improve sleep practices, in the sense that if you feel that you don't have it figured out right now, we can help you. And, I hope that this talk feels really meaningful in the sense that you can start now. If your routines have gone out the window, if you're like my family and everyone's been sick on repeat, right? You feel like the routines, you're losing the sleep routine, you can get back. And I would just encourage you to think about the fact that sleep is central and important for all of us. And sleep disruption is one of the greatest challenges that parents face. So I would love to get into it. We've got some questions, some top of mind questions that have already come in, and we'll just go back and forth. Yes.
Yeah. But before we jump into that, Chloe, I think I love the idea of thinking about having families focus on routines. All of the research shows us that, kids who have a regular routine, every night of the week, and a consistent bedtime, so it's not only about the routine, but it's also about the timing, that we're fairly consistent with, when they're going to bed, as well as how we're getting them to bed. It really has been shown to be, ensuring that, or helping kids sleep longer and sleep better. So if it's sort of one thing that you can try to do, is think about having that consistent bedtime routine and consistent bedtime. And I know that it's not easy when, we have a lot going on, but I guarantee you that just having that consistency for your kids and for your family really goes a long way in getting them to sleep better and longer, but also to, thinking about that sort of next day behavior as well. If they know what to expect, and also too, that sleep is just something else we do in this family. We get up, we have our breakfast, we go to school, we go to daycare, we go to the park, we have dinner, we have lunch, we have a bath, and we go to bed. It's just something else that we do. It doesn't need to be that we have to make this huge song and dance about it. I want it to be, it's just another thing that we do in our day. It's incredibly important, as is, eating the right foods and making sure everyone's getting sort of the exercise that they need. But I want it to be that it's just something easy that we, it's just something else we do in the day.
I love what you said, Natalie, because what we also know from the research is that our babies, specifically babies' brains, are wired to detect patterns, which is why these routines are so important. And a routine doesn't need, I work with so many families with little babies, and I think we hear routine and we think, wait, I might not be a routine person. I'm intimidated. What does it need to involve? It can be so simple, right? It could be something as simple as the lights go off, the shades go down. If you're using any kind of sound, you turn it on. swaddle or sleep sack, and goodnight, right? But just
Exactly.
that pattern is enough.
Yes. And
Um,
what I really want, so to that point, Chloe, what I really want people to try and avoid is a really, really long bedtime routine. I do not want your bedtime routine to be this 2 hours and thing. You know, I want it to be sort of short, sharp. You have dinner, you jump it, you get in the bath, you have the, last feed, last walk, whatever, that it kind of moves along. I don't want it to be that it's this long, drawn out, laborious process. Because also too, I want it to be that it's so simple, anyone can do it. I live in New York City, so I always say, I want it to be that the doorman could come up and do this bedtime routine. I don't want it to be that it's only one person can ever, do all of the steps of the routine. We want it to be sort of fairly simple, but also I want it to be fun and enjoyable. So I don't want it to be, if your baby, for example, if your baby really doesn't like taking a bath, or it's very stressful for you, if you're coming home from work and you're trying to get everyone sort of, fed and bathed and blah, 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 and it is incredibly stressful to get that bath step in, you don't have to have the bath. The bath does not have to be, an essential part of the bedtime routine. If it doesn't work for you to have a bath at nighttime, you can have a bath a different time of the day or a different time of the week, particularly for, little babies. They don't need to be, to be bathed every day. For a lot of families, a bath is a lovely part of the bedtime routine, but for some families, it's not. And I don't want people to feel like there's only one way to do a bedtime routine. I want it to be something that your family enjoys. I want you to look forward to that bedtime routine. And if it's going to be stressful for you or for your baby, it's not going to be something that you're going to look forward to. So play around with what works for you as a family and find, a couple of things that you can do, every night fairly consistently. For some families, that might be reading a book. For some families, it might be singing songs. For some families, it might be something else. But this is your new family, and it's your opportunity to be, creating these, very special, routines and memories that your, baby and child are going to remember forever. So I think, whilst I don't want it to be, this difficult thing, I do want parents to be thoughtful about it and remember that it can be something that can be just a really lovely, beautiful part of the day. And I know a lot of you might be saying, this woman is crazy. Bedtime is a freaking nightmare in our house. And I completely understand that. But I don't want it to be a nightmare. I want it to be easy, and I think starting with, sort of getting back to basics of having sort of a fairly consistent, simple bedtime routine is just a great place to start.
Yeah, and I actually feel like, Natalie, you're answering. So we got a question in, expecting mom due in August, wondering what the best practices are to implement now. And I feel like, Natalie, what you were speaking to, I mean, having a simple routine. Now, of course, you don't know what your baby's going to be like and what their temperament's going to be. And it's hard to know what kind of parent you're going to be, right? We can only prepare,
Yes.
we can only prepare so much. But
Yes,
what's
we're all perfect before we have babies.
right. Totally.
Parents, sorry.
Totally. So what's most important is having a consistent sleep routine, because remember, at the beginning, you're not going to have a perfect schedule. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Your baby's going to be doing a lot of sleeping and a lot of eating, and it's going to feel like you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. So instead of focusing on the perfect schedule, I much rather you think about what your routine is, and you and your partner or co-parent getting on board together, any other caregivers. And so what your baby expects from you is going to be the same as what your baby expects from the other caregiver in the house. And that consistency is so important. So I love, and also just so much credit to you for thinking about sleep and thinking about this now before you're due. It's really awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it too.
We did get a question, Natalie, about what the research and the data say about white noise. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Chloe, I'm happy to speak to it. So the only evidence that we see in the literature of the effects of white noise are positive, right? So unless that white noise is too loud. And so we want to make sure that your white noise machine is not up too loud. But if it is at the right level, the only effects of white noise are positive. So I would love to encourage families to be using white noise, with their babies. From our research, we have seen that babies who have white noise all night long, compared to babies who only have white noise perhaps at the beginning of the night, their longest stretch of sleep is 2 hours longer than babies who only have white noise at the beginning of the night. So and there's other research out there showing that babies sleep longer with white noise. So I don't want you to be scared of white noise. I know there was a study that came out, I think it was Canadian, I can't remember the authors. It came out a few years ago. It got lots of sort of, shock, fear headlines that, white noise is bad for babies. And really what it said was that some of the white noise machines on the market are too loud, and if you have the white noise machines up too loud, it might hurt your baby's ears for sure. But we don't want to, we want to make sure that we're keeping it at the right level.
And Natalie, along with that, just with the volume, making sure that you're sort of strategic in where you're putting that white noise machine if you do have one that's loud, right? Like making sure it's not necessarily directly next to them. If it's louder, keeping it
on the other side of the
further away. And this does go along with, I just wanted to add, you are creating, as a parent, you're creating the sleep environment for your baby. And it's so important at the beginning to help them differentiate night from day, because their circadian rhythm is not established yet. And so during the daytime, right, you're going to fill their feeds and their playtime with light and with voices and with your face. And then during naps and nighttime sleep, you're going to change the environment to control it, to make it more conducive for sleep. And that's everything from pulling the shades to doing that white noise or brown noise or pink noise, right? There are lots of different colored noises now. And creating that sleep environment, swaddling as a form of self-regulation, right? So part of that is on you to create that environment, and they come to really rely on that. And that's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing. And the other thing, Chloe, I actually, the other reason that I love thinking about having, perhaps a white noise machine in this very dark room, and to your point, sort of making this, environment really conducive to sleep, is those things then become sleep associations for your baby. They will hear the white noise, they will see that it's dark and know that they've got to get themselves to sleep. When they wake up in the middle of the night, they will also hear the white noise, see that it's dark, and know that they've got to get themselves back to sleep. So the one thing that I would love to emphasize is that I want parents to remember that whatever their babies need at the beginning of the night to get themselves to sleep is going to be what they need to get themselves back to sleep when they wake up in the middle of the night. So, we want to make sure that whatever they have at the beginning is going to be what they can have throughout the night, which is why, one of the main reasons we want to have that white noise, throughout the night.
And that's actually a huge part of, what we say in so many of our COOP groups when it comes to sleep learning or sleep training, which feels so polarizing, but it doesn't need to be, right? What we say is the most important thing is for your baby to be able to put themselves to bed, right? Fall asleep on their own at their bedtime, because if they can do it at 7 p.m. when you're way more sane than you are at 2 a.m., right? Then they can do it in the middle of the night. So I always say, if you are getting ready to embark on sleep learning, I mean, we have so many resources on it. There are so many ways to safely and effectively do it, but focus on that 7 p.m. bedtime before you try and conquer those middle of the night wake ups, for sure.
For sure. And Chloe, just to clarify, I just want folks to know that when we're talking about, babies falling asleep by themselves at the beginning of the night, or thinking about, sleep teaching or sleep training, we're really thinking about older babies. We're really thinking about babies who are sort of 4 months plus,
Yes.
right? So we're not
Yes.
thinking about those teeny tiny 2 and 3 week olds, at that age, they're just physically not capable of self-soothing. So you need to be the one soothing them. So I don't want you in those early months to feel guilty about rocking and holding and patting and shushing and doing all the things. You do whatever you need to do to keep your baby calm and keep your baby happy.
And there's no spoiling a newborn, right?
Totally. But
Just
as they get a little bit older, they start to become capable of self-soothing, which is when we want to start to give them the opportunity to self-soothe. And there's lots of ways to do that. We don't need to get into sort of, all the ways, but, bottom line, when, Chloe, I love that, Chloe, it's exactly my philosophy too, that we know, and because all of the research bears this out, right? That when babies can fall asleep by themselves at the beginning of the night, it's much easier for them to get back to sleep when they wake up, in the middle of the night. I like to use the analogy that, if your baby is, for example, you have an 8-month-old baby, they're falling asleep in your arms at the bottle, and then you're transitioning them into the crib, and then they're waking up and they don't know where they are. It's kind of like you falling asleep in your bed and then waking up in the middle of the road and not knowing how to get back to your bed. It's frustrating for your baby to A, not know where they are, and B, not know how to get themselves back to sleep. So if we can start that at the beginning of the night, really sort of giving them that opportunity to, fall asleep by themselves, it's going to mean that those night feeds drop super quickly, because most of the time they're actually not, they're not really needing those feeds at night. We're feeding them because they're protesting because they don't know how to get themselves back to sleep. So those night feeds drop really quickly, but also two, your baby is far less frustrated because they're able to just get themselves back to sleep. So it just has a whole host of benefits. But sorry, I remembered what I was about to, I segued away from, but I wanted to say, thinking about the environment that you were talking about, thinking about getting this environment to be conducive to sleep. The other thing that I love about having sort of a dark room, white noise machine, clear crib, is that it makes it really easy to replicate that environment somewhere else. So it makes it really easy to travel with your baby. So when you're going to, because, grandma's house sounds completely different to your house, sounds completely different to a hotel. But it looks different. But if it's dark, we have your white noise machine. It's really easy to replicate that home environment when you travel somewhere else, making it much easier for your baby to be, transportable and movable, and making travel a lot more fun.
totally. Yes, I love that. And thank you for specifying, of course, with any sleep learning or sleep training, you want to wait for the pediatrician recommendation, which often comes around the 4-month mark, after they have learned how to self-soothe just a little bit. And if you're before the 4-month mark, right, swaddling is a form of self-regulation. It's so comforting to our babies. Pacifier use for sleep, also very comforting. So moving on, because we've got quite a few questions. Natalie, we got a question in. So moving to slightly older, transitioning a toddler to a big kid bed. Any thoughts there? And then I can chime in after you.
I would love to hear your thoughts, Chloe, but for me, so there's a couple of things that go into that. I would want to understand, do we know how old this baby is?
I don't know that we have.
Okay. So when we're thinking about transitioning a toddler to a big kid bed, there's a couple of things that I would want to make sure that we do and don't do. I want to make sure that we're not moving this toddler because we need to give the crib to the new baby.
That's my number one tip. I was going to say too, like, do not give the crib for the new baby.
The $100 IKEA crib for a second crib is going to be literally the best money that you ever spend.
Yeah.
What I do not want to do, Chloe, is when a new baby comes in, and look, and I'm not, you know all of this, but when a new baby comes along, the way that I like to think about it is it's kind of like my husband coming home and saying, I have a new wife. She's going to live with us. I'm going to spend all of my time with her. She's going to wear all the clothes that you're too fat to wear. The whole world is excited that she's here, and you just have to live with it, right? And that's kind of what it's like for these toddlers who have a new baby come into the house. You know, everyone can be talking about, oh, the baby coming and the baby this, but a toddler has no concept of what it means to have a new sibling or have a baby. And so, you know, so I always want to make sure that we're not moving the toddler out of their, you know, ripping them out of the only bed they've ever known, because you're just setting yourself up for disaster. So keep those kids, you know, in that crib space for as long as you can. I want to make sure it's not around a time of another big transition, like you're moving to a new house or they're starting school or something like that. And then thirdly, when we are thinking about transitioning to a toddler bed, I want to get that toddler's buy-in. I want this to be the most exciting thing that has ever happened to this child. So I want them to help choose the bed. I want them to talk about, you know, I want you to talk about how exciting it is to be a big kid in a big kid bed. Big kids stay in their bed all night long. Big kids fall asleep by themselves in this big kid bed. Big kids can get to choose a new cover or a new pillow or a new something. We want to make it as exciting as we can for them. But that said, that transition can be incredibly overwhelming for a toddler to go from having this very, you know, safe, secure crib space to then be sort of overwhelmed with all of this freedom. I think it's important for families to sort of think about making sure that we're setting boundaries at the same time that we're transitioning to that bed. Sorry, you can jump in, Chloe.
No, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Go with one more, then I'll jump in.
Okay. So I want to make sure that so the other thing that I want to think about too is the nap. So I want to think about the timing of the nap if you're transitioning to a toddler bed, because very often if we're seeing sort of bedtime resistance at around 1 or 2 or 3, it's very often to do with the timing of the nap. So the nap is either too long or the nap is too late. So when you are transitioning to a toddler bed, I want to make sure that that kid is as tired as you can possibly make them, so that we're making it easy for them to fall asleep. So I don't want it to be that so just think about that timing. If the, you know, child is, you know, 2 or 2.5, they may need, you know, a much longer wait window than what you actually are used to, you know, giving them for that, you know, for that time between the nap and going to bed. And also too, a lot of kids transition out of the nap at 2.5, 3. When kids transition from one nap down to no nap varies tremendously. I've seen 18-month-olds, you know, not take a nap, and I've seen 5-year-olds still take a nap. So we have this huge range in what is normal around, you know, around dropping that nap. So the one thing I would just say is just watch out for that timing. So it may be if your 2.5-year-old, 3-year-old is still taking a nap, we want to make sure that that nap is, you know, shorter or earlier, or we may even have to push the bedtime back a little bit later temporarily, as when we're doing this transition, just to make sure that they're tired going into that bed.
Hit all, I feel like we were in each other's brain. You said all the things I was going to say. The only additional thing that I'd add is just, if you're thinking about this transition, I would urge you to think about why now. Okay. The crib, if it's working, okay. Even if you feel like the people around you with kids similar age are moving to a toddler bed, I would urge you to think about, why am I moving my kid? Is it for me, or is there a reason, right? Because the crib, if it's working, you might feel societal pressure to move away from it. But if it's working, stick with it right now, okay?
Yes.
As someone, full disclosure, who is in the middle of this transition, it's challenging. I would also say, you know, if you have a kid that is moving to a toddler or big kid bed, they are old enough to most likely be pushing boundaries. This is a really good opportunity for you and your co-parent or partner to establish some limits and boundaries. What does bedtime look like? What are your expectations? Obviously, keeping it developmentally appropriate, right? We can't expect a 2-year-old to tuck themselves in and entertain themselves with a book, right? That's not super developmentally appropriate, although some kids might do it. So set some limits. And I think it's the teacher in me, but I am such a big fan of some visual cues. You don't need to start with this, but if bedtime is a challenge, I often find that having some visual cues, little pictures to show your kid what's expected of them can be really helpful. So yes, anyone who is in this transition, I just want you to know, despite working in the field, I understand. This is a hard one. Okay, I'm looking because we're getting so many great questions. Next question would be, okay, is there a technique for sleep training a baby when it already sleeps through the night 4 nights a week? Natalie, my answer to this would be you can sleep train a baby if they're sleeping some of the nights and not others. Yes, of course you can sleep train so long as they're past that 4-month mark and you've got the okay from your pediatrician. If they're falling asleep on their own, those 4 nights a week, that's telling us a lot. They're capable of it. So what I would say to you, my advice would be, you need to think about your temperament and your tolerance. Of course, cry it out is an effective and safe and fast method, but it's not necessarily right for every family. And so we talk a lot at Cooper about 3 different ways of sleep learning or sleep training. And you can think about, do you want to do the fast and targeted approach, the cry it out on those 3 nights a week when they're not falling asleep on their own? Or do you want to try something more gradual where you put them down and you go in every 5 minutes and you soothe as necessary, leave them in the crib? That would be like my number 1 recommendation when you're soothing. Leave them in the crib and then you leave, you come back and soothe after 10 minutes, right? And then there's, on the other end of the spectrum, there's something called camping out, where you would just sit next to the crib and you would verbally and physically soothe as necessary to calm them down. So you can sleep train for a nap, you can sleep train 2 nights a week, but it feels very promising to me if they're sleeping through the night 4 nights a week. That's telling me, so long as they're falling asleep on their own, they do know how to do it.
Yeah. So Chloe, I would just add to that. I think the most important thing that, Chloe and I will both say is that the most important thing that you can do is have them fall asleep by themselves at the beginning of the night. So I would say a couple of things. Let's focus on that, make sure that that is what your baby is doing. And B, if your baby is doing that, it could mean that they're hungry. If they are waking up a couple of nights a week, they may be hungry and you may want to be feeding them a couple of nights a week. We don't know how old this baby is. And so, but also too, I think it's a nice reminder to think about, making sure that they're getting everything that they need during the day. So if they're capable of going through the night without a feed, and we've seen them do it sort of, fairly regularly, I think it's a good reminder to think about, we know that your baby is going to need a certain number of calories in a 24-hour period. We want to make sure that they're getting everything that they need in that 12-hour period and not needing something, not then needing that feed in the middle of the night. So like I say, we don't know all of the details, but there are sort of, tips for around what we do know. So
yes. And actually, thank you, Natalie, for that. And connected to that question was when regressions come. And I just wanted to quickly, we also have a great question about camping with a baby, which Natalie, I can't wait for us to cover. In terms of, regressions can happen for a lot of different reasons. I think as parents, sometimes we hold on to this idea of a 4-month regression or a 9-month regression because it sort of gives us a reason behind interrupted sleep. But the truth is, regressions can happen because of developmental milestones. They can happen because of teething. They can happen because of separation anxiety and this new understanding of like, wait a second, you walk out of my room, but you still exist. That's the idea of object permanence. And we see separation anxiety. Regressions can happen because of changes in routine or environment, because of illness. My goodness, the season of illness. and power battles, right? Just power struggles with a toddler. So the best thing to do, because a regression can feel so different at different ages for different reasons. You need to, a regression related to illness, how you approach that's going to be very different than a regression related to something else, right? When your kid is sick, you need to give them what they need to make them feel better, right? But staying consistent, I feel like I'm saying the same thing over and over, but staying consistent with your bedtime routine, continuing to create that sleep environment for them. And maybe the most important one, all caregivers on board. Because if one parent handles a regression one way, and then in swoops grandma handling the regression in a different way, speaking from personal experience, right? Then that is a very hard message for your baby or your toddler to make sense of. And also understanding that these disruptions happen, right? So sometimes you can have like all the stars aligned and you've got a great routine and a disruption in sleep. I mean, if I eat a meal too late, I don't have as good of a sleep as if I eat my dinner a little earlier, right? So we have our own version of this as well. As adults, we often know, like, I know if I have a big piece of steak at 8:45 at night, my sleep's not going to be super great, right? So I just wanted to add that on regressions. We have, Natalie, this is so best sleep practices when you're camping or you're without electricity for toddlers or 6-month-old babies.
Oh, I'm going to have you take that, girlfriend. There's no way in God's green earth that I would take a baby camping.
Okay, I wish my husband was, I wish my husband was on this, because I really wasn't a camper until I met him, and I've dipped my toes in. So what I will say is,
yeah, well,
wow,
my husband takes our 3 boys camping, and I know that's a terrible thing to admit, but I'm just not a
no,
camper.
that's okay.
I grew
It's
up in
not
the
for
outback.
everybody.
It's not, I'm a farm
It's
girl,
not.
but I tried very hard to get away from the farm, and I live in New York City. I'm very happy in New York City, and I'm not a camper.
Yeah,
But
it
I know that
doesn't
it's
need
for a
to
lot of
be.
families. Yes, but go
Well,
for it.
so what I would say is, first of all, very brave and very wonderful. Here's what I would say about any change in your child's sleep environment, where you're going from home to camping or home to a hotel, right? We have routines because they're important. And Natalie and I have talked a lot about that tonight. But guess what? You can also break your routine every once in a while, right? And come back to your routine when you return. So the way I think about it is, when I go on a trip with some of my really good girlfriends, right? All my routines are off. Everything I'm doing is off. And for 1 or 2 days of that, it's totally great. And by the 3rd day, I'm like, get me back, right? I want my white noise. I want my bed. I want my shades. I want all the things. So what I would say is, go in with a little bit of a sense of humor and some flexibility, right? There are definitely some portable sound machines on the market. If that piece is important to you, you can create that sleep environment we've been talking about all night, right? You would still do the sleep sack. I would say, if you're camping, just, pay attention to temperatures and making sure that your baby has what they need in a safe way to be warm, right? So thinking about that sleep sack. You can bring the portable noise machine if you want. If that's something that's important to you, I know that those are on the market.
The other
And
thing,
those would
I love
probably
the travel, and I don't know if it depends on how big your tent is for camping, but I don't know if you know the Slumber Pod. But the Slumber Pod is this really lovely product that basically goes sort of over the top of the crib, or a pack and play, to basically create this really dark environment for your baby when you're traveling somewhere. So if you're having if you're camping and you are using a pack and play, I would highly recommend a Slumber Pod, because those, from what my husband tells me, the children wake up very early. The sun is up, very early, and, kids just wake up with the sun, it's just what they're going to do. So if we can try and make that, sleeping space as dark as we can. So whether it's the Slumber Pod, or whether you have some way of sort of making the tent, have some sort of blackout material perhaps you can put over the tent. I don't know how that works, but maybe you could, maybe you can try and do that.
I love that suggestion, because you can remember, it is about creating that sleep environment, right? And obviously you're working with what you've got. When you're out in nature, it's going to be a little bit different. As you can tell, Natalie and I know our strengths, and we are, I might say I'm a camping girl, but I'm not sure I am. So, okay, couple more questions. I know we're coming up on time here, so I want to get to everybody. Tips for a 1.5-month-old dealing with separation anxiety.
Month-old is not going to have separation anxiety, Chloe, and you might want to speak to that.
I can speak to that a little bit. So what I would say is,
oh, she's actually saying 15-month-old, not
15-month-old. Aha. Okay, what I was okay.
Great.
So 15-month-old, very typical to see separation anxiety. It's typical to see it at bedtime. It's typical to see it at a drop-off at daycare or with a nanny or with a family member. So the best things to do, again, I'm a broken record, but staying consistent in your goodbyes. So with a 15-month-old coming, even if it's bedtime, let's just talk bedtime because we're sleep focused tonight, having a little routine when you leave the room. Good night, sleep well, see you in the morning, and out. The more we prolong the routine and the more emotionally invested we get in it, the harder the goodbye is. By the way, when you walk to the door and then you look back and you see their cute face and you can't help but give that other kiss, right? It's very sweet, but it's also making it harder. So stay, keep that routine really tight.
Yeah, one other thing that I would just add to that is that I want to look at the timing as well. So 15 months is sort of a very classic time for babies to transition from 2 naps down to 1. So it could be that your baby is ready to transition to, 1 nap, but they're still taking 2. And so they're just not awake for long enough to have built up enough sleep pressure to be tired enough to be going to sleep. So it could just be that they're delaying bedtime and trying to get you to stay when really they're just not tired enough. So it may be that we need to just sort of extend that wake window a bit to make sure that they're tired enough.
Definitely. And the message for separation anxiety with sleep, the message is pretty similar if they're dealing with separation anxiety at other points in their day, right? A great goodbye routine. My son and I, he's had separation anxiety. He's now 3. We do a boop. We say goodbye at the door and we do boop, and that's our thing.
Amazing.
Okay, let's see. We are coming up to, I think we've answered most of these questions here. One question. So what age does an infant tune into a bedtime routine? Have a 6-month-old and starting to see a regular sleep pattern emerge. Natalie, do you want to speak to that briefly?
Talk to that, Chloe. I think this is a perfect time to start thinking about a bedtime routine and a consistent bedtime. So we might see in those early months that your baby does not have, like to Chloe's point, previously, they don't have a great schedule. They can be, sleeping sort of anywhere and everywhere. But at 6 months, I know that your baby's circadian rhythm has developed. They're probably telling you that they are ready to go to bed somewhere between 6 and 8 p.m. And I think it's a great time to be starting to focus on that bedtime routine as a first step to getting them to sleep through the night. But so that said, I want you to choose a bedtime that works for your family, somewhere between 6 and 8 p.m. And so if you're coming home from work at 7:30, you're not going to choose a bedtime that's 6:45 because you or your partner are not going to get to see the baby. So we want to try and choose a bedtime that works for your family, but is within that sort of general range of somewhere between 6 and 8. And then think about having a routine that is fairly simple and fairly short. For most 6-month-olds, that probably looks like, either a bath or getting changed into pajamas, and then a last feed of the day, and then a book, and then into bed. So, and at 6 months, your baby may not be super interested in a book, but I really love to do something in between the feed and having your baby go into the crib. And so if we can break that up by having, a book or a song or whatever works for your family, it will be great to not have that feed become a strong sleep association. Because what we want to avoid at 6 months, I'm not talking about 3 weeks or 4 weeks old, but at 6 months, I want your baby falling asleep by themselves at the beginning of the night in that crib space. I don't want them falling asleep at the breast or the bottle. So if we can have, as part of the routine, we can have something in between that feed and when they're going into the crib, it's really going to help them sort of learn to fall asleep by themselves and really establish that nice, bedtime routine for you.
Thank you, Natalie, for carrying the weight on that. My internet just died, which is ironic because I was telling you about why I switched locations for better internet. The one thing that I wanted to add to what you just said, and I don't just correct me if you already spoke about this, with older babies, so 6 months old, for example, if we're feeding them to sleep, aside from the fact that we're taking away the chance for them to learn to fall asleep on their own, we're also kind of blowing by their fullness cues, right? We talk about this as the interoceptive sense, and it is important. I think many of us adults, myself included, are still trying to think and understand when we're full. But we do want to give our babies a chance to feel that feeling, and we also want to pay attention to their fullness cues. So, we have one more question, and then we're going to get ready to wrap up in just a few minutes. Last question, Natalie. My baby keeps waking up too early in the morning. What can I do to encourage later wake times? And we'll end with this.
Oh, Chloe. Okay. Yeah. Do we know how old this baby is?
We do not know how old this baby is.
Okay. All right. So a couple of things. You actually have a lot of choices here. The first thing I would do is I would actually put black garbage bags on your window as a first step. Yeah. So I want to make that room as dark as it can possibly be. So even if you have, blackout blinds and sort of a blackout shade over the top, sometimes you may need something sort of just a little bit more to make sure that there's not that crack of light coming through. I know we've just gone through the time change, but we're moving into summer and the sun is just coming up. It's just going to be coming up earlier. So we want to make sure that that room is really dark. We want it to be the same when they went to bed as when they when they wake up in the morning. We want it to be as dark as we can. The other thing we can think about is we can make, and like I said, I don't know how old this baby is, but I want to make sure that that baby is getting everything that they need to eat in that 12-hour period, because they could be genuinely waking up hungry, in the early hours. That said, if they are waking up in those early hours of the morning hungry, I want you to treat it like a night feed. It is not the beginning of the day. So if they're waking up at 4 a.m. is not the beginning of the day. You can give them a quick feed and then get them straight back down to bed. The other thing that I want folks to know is that in those early hours of the morning, a lot of babies come in and out of these light stages of sleep. They can become fully awake, and it can be really hard for them to get themselves back to sleep. And people very often mistake these early morning wake-ups for hunger when they're not hunger. It's just that they don't know how to get themselves back to sleep, or they're used to someone coming to get them at that time of the morning. So what I don't want your 6-month-old 5 a.m. waker to then become a 2-year-old 5 a.m. waker. And so I would love to give your baby the opportunity to get themselves back to sleep at that time of the morning. And you can do that in, a variety of different ways, and think about perhaps choosing a wake up time. So say, okay, I am not going to this baby before 6 a.m. or 6:30 or 7, whatever the time is. I typically don't like to do a time before 6. And then either give them the opportunity to get themselves back to sleep, go in and do whatever sleep training method you were thinking of doing, but also be consistent about whatever method you choose, be consistent about it.
Yes, that's huge. I love that. Thank you, Natalie. So everyone, we are coming up on time. I wanted to thank you all for your really very thoughtful questions across all ages tonight, and wanted to make sure you knew how to find us if you have more questions, and how to get more resources. So you can find us at yourcooper.com. I can share my email in the chat. It's Chloe@yourcooper.com. I'd be happy to answer any questions that we didn't get to. And we are your_Cooper on Instagram. We would love to have you. You can try us for a month free if you would like. And Natalie, where can everyone find Nanit? Although I'm sure they likely know, but just in case.
So we are at nanit.com. And if you look to our Nanit Lab research page, or we have, yes, get_Nanit on Instagram, or our research page, you can find there's a research email there that will get to me if anyone. So
Fabulous. Thank you. This has been such a treat. Thank you so much, Natalie. It was very fun doing this together.
Let's do it
One of
again.
my favorite subjects. Let's definitely do it again, and maybe we'll learn to camp. Thank you, everybody. We hope that you have a wonderful night, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Amazing. Thanks, Chloe. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, Natalie. Bye.